The Fujifilm X100VI is the most popular compact camera on the market, but it's sold out everywhere. So I asked Fujifilm to send me one for a review, because I am desperate to find a camera that could replace all my other gear. So for the next 2 weeks, I used the X100VI for everything. And today I'm going to tell you if it lived up to my expectations. It wasn't easy to get a camera for a test. Everyone wanted to get their hands on one, and since my channel is small, I had to wait months. But in the end, Fujifilm came through and I could begin. Is it even possible for the small X100VI to replace all my cameras? It only has a fixed 23mm lens and 2 convenient but bulky lens adapters. The reality is that I do 99% of my personal photography with the Leica CL mounted with the 23mm Samicron. A setup with the same sensor size and the same focal length, but both larger and heavier than the X100VI. On top of that, the Fuji camera also comes with IBIS, better video, tilting LCD, leaf shutter, built-in flash and optical viewfinder. And to be honest, I'm getting tired of looking at electronic viewfinders. While the projected image is always crisp and sharp, it has a tiny delay, and that can have an impact when I'm capturing the decisive moment. And it's another screen I look at on top of my computer, phone and TV. So I set up the camera to my usual settings. If you want to know what those are, there's a link below for my quick camera setup guide. It covers the basic things I change on every camera before I use it for the first time. And for the next 2 weeks I used the X100VI for all the types of photography I usually do. I took it for a street photography walk and had a good time. The camera was like at home in this environment and performed as well as expected. The images came out well, and I didn't need to do much to the raw files in post-processing. I had the same experience with images from the Fujifilm X-T5. Both cameras have the same 40 megapixel sensor. It's very good and definitely a step up from the previous generations. I did have a few issues when using the X100VI. Several times I accidentally pressed one of the many buttons on the back of the camera. But it is more down to my little experience with handling the camera, and also I would enjoy adding a grip, which is something I've done with all my cameras. I like the programmable ring on the lens, but it shouldn't be set to change crop modes by default. Any accidental touch on the ring will change the focal length and it can become annoying. At first I didn't know why it was happening. I was expecting the ring to be set for manual focus, but it's easy to change in the camera settings. I also used the X100VI only with the optical viewfinder, and it was a nice change from the EVF only cameras that I own. It was very nice to look at the world as it is. I am not a big fan of the little screen you can add to the optical viewfinder. I find it distracting and I turned it off. The downside of the optical viewfinder is the automatic parallax correction. It's good that it's there because you can see the actual frame, but it can be disturbing to your workflow. Sometimes the frame moves a lot after focusing and you need to recompose your shot, or do a step back, when the frame gets smaller than expected. But this is only a problem when taking photos of subjects that are close to the camera, and it's easy to get used to over time. I used the X100VI this way also for photos of my family. Here it was about focusing speed, sharpness and correct exposure in day-to-day situations. My 2-year-old son doesn't stay still for a second, so that is a good challenge for any camera. I found the focusing to be fast and precise enough, although the lens is noisier than expected. Fujifilm missed out on designing the lens with eternal focusing. That would be a nice upgrade, but I guess it would mean too much of an investment, which would then inflate the final price of the camera even more. The X100VI was also a good companion for casual snaps, although I still prefer my Ricoh GR3X for its pocketable size. I can also do without a viewfinder for snap photography, but I'm nitpicking here. I tried to use the tilting LCD for low angle shots. It worked, but I found that the screen reflects a lot of light when outside. A matte screen protector will help to deal with this issue. So I was quite happy with the Fujifilm X100VI. And yes, it can replace all my cameras, since 99% of the time I use a 35mm equivalent lens. But At the beginning of my 2 weeks test, I was almost certain it would happen, that I will join many waiting lists and start praying to get this camera before Christmas. But when it was time to send it back, I wasn't so sure anymore. I did like the camera and I would love to own one, but after 2 weeks of use, I cannot imagine it being my only photographic device. Not because I could not live with only a fixed 35mm lens, but because the X100VI still has a few design and firmware choices that kept driving me mad every time I used it. Its menu system is too complex. Its small body has buttons that I will rarely use, but I know that I will accidentally press them in the most important situations. Of course, none of this is a deal breaker. I can set up the camera in a way that will fit me better. But if I'm going to own only one fixed lens camera, it should be as close to my ideal as possible. For such a simple concept, this beautiful compact camera is too complex. It's trying to do too much. And it makes me think of all the new photographers who will buy one of these and get distracted by all the options this camera offers, when all they need is a box with a viewfinder, a lens, sensor and exposure triangle controls. So I've got what I wanted, a camera with optical viewfinder, tiltable screen and a higher resolution sensor, and all that in a beautiful compact body. But I still enjoy the simplicity of my Leica CL and images it can produce. Also, having the option to swap lenses is a bonus, even though I do not need it every day. And it's not just the expensive Leica camera. The Nikon ZFC with 24mm Nikkor lens is very hard to beat in its price range. And don't get me started on the budget king, the Fujifilm X100VI with the TT Artisan 27mm lens. But that doesn't make the Fuji X100VI any less good, and I would still love to own one. Who knows, it may happen. But if Fujifilm decided to make a new generation of this little gem, I would place a pre-order in a heartbeat.